Hola, buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us one more day. My name is Alejandro García Hermida, Executive Director of the Driehaus initiatives in Spain and Portugal, and also responsible for the initiatives of INTBAU in Spain. We are starting the second day of our international conference on traditional building architecture and urbanism. And we are going to listen to a number of presentations, just like yesterday, and we will also hold two panel discussions. If you had any technical problems yesterday, well, we have tried to sort out the technical issues, and hopefully everything will go smoothly. This conference is part of a number of meetings that we've been holding since 2012 on the occasion of the award-giving ceremony of the Rafael Manzano Prize for New Traditional Architecture, which is presented to Spanish or Portuguese architects who have dedicated their professional career to the continuity of architectural tradition, either in new projects or in rehabilitation and restoration works, or as it is the case with this year's laureate, Fernando Martín Sanjuán, combining both activities throughout his career. This prize is part of a number of initiatives supported by the Driehaus Charitable Lead Trust, which includes an architecture competition, the Building Masters Awards, the Donald Gray Scholarship for Artisans, the National Network of Spanish Master Artisans. All of this with the support of a number of institutions, such as the Ekaba Foundation or the Fundação Serra Henriques in Portugal. These seminars are annually held at the School of Architecture of the Universidad Politécnica of Madrid, where I am a professor. We have not met. We have not been able to meet personally this year for reasons that you all know well. However, this has given us the opportunity to increase considerably the number of participants online. I hope you enjoy today's agenda, and if you are interested in additional content, you can visit the website, which includes presentations and the conferences. We will be uploading additional content throughout this coming week. And by the way, most of the presentations will be published at the Journal of Traditional Building Architecture and Urbanism, which will be published next week. And it will also be available at our website. Please visit the Rafael Manzano Prize website or INTBAU Spain website, where you will have access to all of this content. Okay, we're starting today with the laureate, the winner of the Rafael Manzano Prize in 2020, Rafael Martín Sanjuán, who's dedicated his life to new constructions and renovation and restoration projects, especially in his hometown of Écija. And he has done a very great effort at preserving the essence of the city, using the materials, the techniques, and the very language of the town, not trying to impose any trends, but trying to speak the language of the city of Écija.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your invitation. I am really thankful. And I would like to thank the jury for their consideration with regards to my work, and more especially Richard H. Driehaus for his sponsorship. So thank you all very much. And Alejandro, Rebecca, for your support, for the support that you have provided me with at all times. It has been a real pleasure to be here with you. Thank you very much. The images that we're about to see correspond, all of them, to interventions that have taken place in the architectural heritage of the city of Écija. Most of you know that Écija is an average-sized city with 40,000 inhabitants that belongs to the countryside of Seville, that is considered historical artistic site since 1966. The city is the heritage of the old Roman colonia that was founded by the Emperor Augustus in the year 14 before Christ, considered Roman Colonia Augusta Firma Astigi. Together, and from north to south, with Cádiz, with Hispalis, with Cordoue, and with Astigis, which was Écija. So 4 different circumscriptions, administrative districts that made the Roman Betica territory. A territory that corresponds in its surface to Andalusia nowadays. And we can see here on this map the most important points that we will be analyzing within the city in a radius of 700 meters. In a radius of 700 meters, which is the circle, the pointed circle. And you can see that it is a bit smaller than the walled enclosure, the wall almohad, because the Roman walls were bigger, but that's a different matter. So the Palace of Panamek is the first building that we will be seeing. It's of cultural interest, and the project was for the transformation of the Municipal Museum of History. It is an imposing building, which is one of the Baroque palaces that are most important in Andalusia, that was built with exposed brick and with tiles and with stonework, with a very important entrance with incrustations and couple columns, where we see that all the possible polychrome has been used, with marbles coming from Cordoue, Estepa, Carcahuay, Cabra, Elena. And this is the map of the building, the colored part, which has a surface of 3,000 square meters with 5,000 square meters built. This was done together with the technical office of the City Council of Écija. The palace was in the 18th century the residence of the Marquis of Aranjuez, then of Valverde, and in 20 it was the military command. The mandate that I was given was, once the cavalry barracks left the building, to restore it. These are some of the drawings that I did of the outside and the courtyard, some formal elements in the building, and this is the entrance. This is the publication that was done when I entered the Royal Academy of Fine Arts and Royal Academy of Humanities, Luis Vélez de Guevara. This was published together by the General Directorate of the University for Research in the Regional Ministry of Education and Science and the Royal Academy of Fine Arts. Here you see the tower before and after. It had been partitioned ever since the the Lisbon earthquake, and we see that the columns were completely reinforced and closed. They were fragmented within the walls. This is the entrance hall, which has completely changed the structure of the square. It was completely impenetrable when the military were present. It was unknown to the people in the city, but we opened it up and we made that entrance hall into a square that is nowadays being visited because there's actually an interesting restaurant, the Ninfas restaurant, and also a center for the equine arts. And we can also see that that leads to a courtyard, a delicious courtyard that has a double, a two-pillared stories courtyard. We see that it has segmental arches and rounded archway. And the criteria that was followed with the new use was to let the building speak, to keep and consolidate the architecture that was there first, and to eliminate all the alterations that were made later on, to identify the special characteristics for the new uses, and to let the building itself generate the result, the final result. Here we can see the halls dedicated to complementary spaces with 6 spans, and the other ones have spans of 3 meters that are for circulation. And the Santa Ella Palace is the next building that we worked on. It is a building that became, well, it actually changed its use as well. It is now a social club. It has 1,600 square meters, and it is a project that I did with Javier Madero and Alberto Gutierrez, where we tried to consider this building that was a Baroque palace, very, very interesting, that is crossed over by the Almond walls, and it is separated. We have the living quarters at one hand of the wall and the recreational zone and open air spaces in the other side. So these are some of the most singular spaces. And here we see the entrance through the tunnel. We see the paving from Cordoba. We have the Ampelopsis courtyard. We call it Ampelopsis courtyard because it was a plant that was cared for since the beginning of the restoration, because it made it very singular, because the Ampelopsia went all the way to the roof tiles. This is the staircase, and this is the window that we see at the landing of the staircase. We see that there is curved and straight lintel with a polychrome verida. We see that there is an interesting railway here that is made of it's forged and chiseled. Here we have the courtyard that was also transformed. It had been enclosed. We opened it up again, and we see that the floors were completely ruined because it was an adobe that had capillarity problems, because the phreatic level had been doing its damages in the area due to the rising of the river. Then we have the next palace, which is also very interesting. It's an interesting building that was acquired by the Tamarida Almagro family. So there was no change of use. It's the same use. It's a residential building. It's usually difficult to find a project such as this one where you have to work on a building for residential use. I did this in collaboration with Peri Zamorro's study with Louis Bach. So these are some details of the work that we did, constructive details. This is a courtyard. The courtyard also had capillarity problems. Humidity reached all the way up to the ear flaps and the headers of the doors. We had to completely renew the whole level 0, and we used inert materials and sophisticated systems for floor heating. Together with the existence of this window, this laminated glass window, we managed to temper the temperature in such a big space without having to use closing of the arches. So this is the back, and it had been also in 1929 reformed, where they created neo-Nasrid style, and although it was later in the time, it did have some singularity and it was part of the identity of the building, so we maintained it. In the Ostos Palace, which is the next building, it's a newly built building close to the Santa Maria Church. And you can see here that they have a retable style entrance that was done with stonework, mortarless stonework with lead joints. Here you see the plant. You see that the body of this body is made up of two bodies. You have the main house that it looks towards the north. It's actually the office of the lawyer who was our client. And down towards the south, we have the what we would call the space for the horses. So these are 1,300 square meters and 700 square meters built. I did it together with my partners, Javier Madero and Jose Oliva. At the time, they were my partners. And these are some drawings of the house and some details. In this case, the guidelines followed in this work was to have a conversation with the previous architecture that we inherited, to use the proportions, the scales, the materials, the textures of the traditional models and vernacular models. And the main premise has always been for the craftsman to work as an ally for the architect, in this case my ally, and they were always present. Craftsmen were always present in the whole project. And here we have the entrance to the house, a space that has the dimensions that usually have these serving spaces. This is characteristic in this sort of houses, and the carpentry is very, very interesting, just like the Balmaceda's carpentry with double woodwork. One is glass, the other has all the window shutters that has been created with Capuchina style doors, and we see that it is flush with a framework, and they have some curved trims in the top and in the bottom. They're curved and straight. We also see that it's all been handmade. All the systems, all the opening and closing and frame systems have been handmade. Here in this image to your left, it's like the painter's palette with 5 different materials, like 5 fingers in our hand. We have the cobblestone, then we have the mud that has been used, and the brick that we have used to create the flooring. We have the sills of the balconies, the imposts, the tile roofs, all of these elements. The third element, as you can see here, is the lime. The lime of the bastard mortar that we have used, the Moron bastard mortar. And then the 2 last are the forged metal working. And the 5th one is the carpentry, a very elaborate carpentry. And we can see that the walls, the separating wall, have also been included here. And now we have all of these interventions, secondary interventions, that I believe are, we could say, the backdrop of the main interventions, but they're as important as the first ones. This is around the Panamek Palace. You can see all these surroundings. These are 3 different homes. This one is the Volante house, and here we see in the entrance we have this gallery that is flying over the courtyard, so that we didn't have to go through the rooms with the mosaic that we recovered. Here we have the Marquesa house with the Church of the Discussed here, where we can see the house, the Caracuel house, which is a new house that is rebuilding a house that was in ruin, but we preserved all of the metal work. We have here to the left the Moron house. It was built on top of the remains of the wall of the original enclosure of the city. Here we have two houses in Aguabajo that are very interesting. They are whitewashed and they are they're well joined with the city. And here we have is to west the marble street. It took people all the way to the minaret of the mosque. Here we have the San Gil Tower. One of the houses is to the right, and it seems to be touching the Almenara Alta Duke's house. And then we have this tile, wall tile that shows the award of for the defense of the heritage. And then we have the Vitre house, which is close to Santa Maria. To your left, you see an interesting small courtyard. It's 7 by 11 square meters. This was actually very interesting for the summer and the winter in these Andalusian houses. We also intervened in the main square, what were called the Miradores, to San Francisco. It turned into a commercial area, and this is one interesting image of the Morejón house. These are the these are the roofs where we don't see the subtleties of houses. So we see how the roofs are dialoguing between them. So with no doubt whatsoever, these interventions, these actions in historic cities require a special subtlety. Walter Benjamin called them places to dream, the place for memory, he called it. And he actually said that the places for memory are our history's brilliant spirit that prevails over our geography. Here we have a couple examples just to finish. In the peripheral areas, here we have the Elvira house. It's a big house with 1 story, 1.5 stories, and 2-story highs, with tile roofs, with everything is whitewashed, and they all fit together. And we see that everything that is coming out is finished with Almagra ceramics. And then Doña Lola's house with a gallery, very traditional gallery with its pillars and with coffered ceiling. And we finish with this Cortijo, the Cárdenas Cortijo, which is a very interesting rural home that is next to Seville. It has a double volume, and then the tower. Everything is whitewashed with all the elements in Almagra ceramics. And with this exercise, we finished this presentation, and I apologize if it took longer than expected. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Fernando. That was an amazing work. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Okay, so we're now going to give the floor to the audience so that they may ask their questions. I'm sure you remember from yesterday, you can write your questions in the chat box. You can send us questions in whatever language you wish to do it, either English or Spanish, and we will be reading your questions as soon as we get them. Okay, thank you. Fernando, the first question, I'm going to ask it myself. It's a question that I want to ask you. I understand that you had a training, a training that didn't really consider the tradition of your city. So how come you started working in Écija, and how did you decide to start studying the local tradition and to base your work on it, your designs on that tradition? How was that process of rediscovering the tradition of your place? Well, to be honest, I started in Seville. The first steps I gave in my profession were with Mr. Rafael Manzano, and then I went to Barcelona, and the school was completely different. That was at the beginning of the 70s. There was this need to show that we were avant-garde, and the schools of architecture at the time had completely forgotten about classical architecture. They had left it in the darkest of shadows. So although I had very good teachers in Barcelona, very interesting teachers in Barcelona, I'm very happy of the time I spent in Barcelona. But when I finished my studies and went back to Écija, I understood that what I had been taught, that modern movement that I had been taught, I didn't really have the tools I needed to work in Écija. So when I started working, I realized that I needed a different sort of knowledge, a different sort of understanding of architecture. And the moment that that moment where I understood I needed to work with local craftsmen, I understood that I needed it. I needed that function so that I could really read the place. And when I talk about the place, I mean, obviously, the building, the historic site, because Rafael says the key, the the key is in each building's DNA, and you have to study that DNA. You have to know it to better understand what it demands, what the building requires. Because in the end, I believe that our interventions on heritage, on monuments, is always letting the monument speak. The solution is always implicit when you read the building. What I mean to say by this is that we have to work a lot with our pencil. We have to be in the monument, in the building. We have to solve the problems in the workshops and in the craftsmen's workshops. And that was the methodology that I kind of made up along the way. I did that together with my craftsmen. Thank you so much, Fernando. That's very interesting. That process is very interesting. I'm guessing that that's the process that many other architects who are now listening to us have followed as well. And there's a question from Julia Villa. She is asking how the neighbors from Écija welcome these monuments, these interventions that are so well integrated in the city. Well, as I was telling you these last few days, everyone is talking about the news, and they are quite impressed because I obviously thank so much the jury for considering my work, but not just because of my own professional trajectory and what this award entails and what it means to me, because it's the most important award that I have gotten during my professional career, but also because the name of my city is now in everyone's in everyone's mouth. So I've always said that I was very lucky to have the possibility of working on such important buildings, buildings that were of cultural interest. So in Écija, they are so happy with the news. I was interviewed the other day, and I'm happy. Obviously, I'm happy to be a part of this and to share this award with everyone. And then the citizens of Écija, the neighbors of Écija, consider that the architecture belongs to the community. The building, what I mean to say is that buildings are important not because they're isolated, but because they are together with other buildings. So it's not the building of the city, it's the building in the city interacting with other buildings. And this is why I presented my work this way. Everything that has been done in Écija, and not just selecting some examples of other cities, because obviously during these decades I have not just worked in Écija, I have worked in other cities, but I have decided to focus just on Écija. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Fernando. We have another question from Robert Adam, who asks, what's the relationship that you have with the technicians that have to do with urban planning in the city? Is your work well received by the local administration? Yes. I was actually the director of the department of the old city of the City Council of Écija, and we had to do that. I was the director of that department, and when the special plan was approved, because Écija has a special plan with 1,008 files in the inventory, and I was the director of that department, and I was a speaker in the Heritage Commission, so I have a very direct relationship with them, and it's a good relationship. I'm a dinosaur, you could say. I'm a bit of a dinosaur in the City Council, and my colleagues, the municipal technicians, some of them are still collaborating with me in Panamek. Actually, there are still some phases that have to be finished. We have to finish the project that I started, that I initiated in the Palace of Panamek, the History Museum. And my colleagues, the young architects, are finishing that project. And also in the house of the square with the municipal archaeologists and the technicians, the municipal technicians, they're developing the roadmap that I created when I designed the master plan for the Plaza de Armas. So my relationship with the technicians is quite direct. I always complain that there are too many rules, that there are too many municipal laws, that there's too much red tape. And sometimes they can be hurdles for the interventions, but I understand that we have to abide by the rules, and we have a very good relation. That's great, having a city where there is such a good understanding and such a good relationship, how to preserve the old town and how to maintain the tradition of the place. And I'm sure that that has an impact in the craftsmen in that area, because it's a live tradition. Are there other architects who are working in your same line? Well, in Écija, there is a tradition in that sense, yes. And when we started in 1974, when I finished my studies, there was only 3 architects, Mr. Madero, Mr. Gutierrez, and myself. And I actually worked with Madero and Oliva. But in the 21st century, since the beginning of the 21st century, there have been many more architects, young people who have finished their studies. But they are quite aware of the importance of preserving traditional architecture. And we also have to think that Écija is a city with a tradition, a long tradition. We had this special plan. It was finished and approved after the Heritage Law of '95 that established that the special plan needed to be drawn. So there is quite a tradition. We also have archaeological excavations. So there is much information regarding our heritage in Écija. So from that point of view, we're quite well covered. Thank you so much, Fernando. Joseba Aña was asking that, well, when looking at the streets in the video, we don't see that there is inconsistency in the architecture, and that is not very common. And in many cities, that was not possible. It was not possible to maintain it. So he asks, what's the reason for that to happen? Well, obviously, the pictures have been taken just to show my projects. So I'm glad that he liked the solutions that I managed to achieve. But obviously, yes, there are other things that we call mess-ups. Not very big mess-ups, but these are interventions prior to this policy that required for a special plan to be established and to have a commission that looked over this. And usually this has been done by architects who are not from Écija, architects who come from the capital city. You know, these projects that a bank will ask to be built, and then the project is done from without, and the sensitivity is completely different. But in general, I do believe that the old town is quite cared for, and now there are some buildings that need to be redone, some viewpoints from the palaces towards the square. The square was the place where every event took place before we had the bull ring in '46. So those are what we call the viewpoints, miradores. And some of those miradores need an intervention. And the city council also, the building of the city council also needs to be worked on. But I led the work in the marketplace. It was a project that was paid for by the Ministry of Public Works, and we did it with Rita Lorite, our colleague from the Ministry of Public Works, and I led it. That was finished, and also the Municipal Theatre San Juan that my grandfather did. He built it as a builder and as an entrepreneur, because That's why I also did with Madero and Oliva this project and the museum that I showed you, the Palace of Panamek that you have seen, and some others, such as buildings that have been recovered to become social clubs, such as the Santa Ella Palace. So there has been an operation for the integration of our typology, in the city in a significant way. So I really invite you all to come and see Écija. Actually, Alejandro, personally, you have to come. You have to come and see me in Écija. You owe me. Yes, I'd love to. I hope I can do it very soon. Okay, so we still are getting lots of questions. Íñigo Coveta is asking, to what extent do you think that such a good experience that we have just seen that has been developed in Écija can be extrapolated to bigger cities? Do you think that it would work in the same way? Well, Écija is the perfect size, really, because what we have seen, these projects that we have seen, are more or less within the field of the enclosed city. That's 40 hectares, and although the city is bigger and there are some neighborhoods outside of the enclosed area, we don't really have so many historical buildings outside of the enclosed area. So when the city is bigger, the problem is that Triana, for instance, has 100 and some monuments, but it's a city at the other side of Seville. Although it is also part of Seville, it has its own autonomy, its own independence. And what I mean to say is that the way of this being extrapolated would be by fragmenting in special plans of smaller size and areas that are more under control. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. So it all hangs in the size. Okay, thank you very much. And Manuel, JC, Marjorie Han, they're asking about the situation of crafts in Écija and the collaboration that you have mentioned with master craftsmen in your work. So how's that collaboration, and what's your experience like with these craftsmen? Well, there are still craftsmen. There are wonderful workers, Miguel Ángel Balmaceda, who was awarded in 2019, and there are very good carpenters and marble workers and master stone workers. They tell me that I am an architect that is always for the different professions, like Alberto Rodriguez for the forge and others. I really am a champion of the guilds, and they are actually surviving pretty well. There is local work not good enough for them to be able to take their work to other cities, but in Écija they are surviving. I also move quite around other cities: Carmona, Fuente de Andalucía, Osuna, Palma del Río. So these are cities that are average sized. None of them is small. They could have they could represent around 200,000 inhabitants among all of them, because Écija only has 40,000. But if we consider all of these little cities, I also collaborate with the craftsmen of the different average sized cities around Écija that still have a great style, and they know how to do their craft. They still know how to do their craft. Now, with regards to the previous question, which do you think would be the best way to manage for these craftsmen, these craftspeople, to really be asked to work more? I mean, so that there is a greater demand for their work. I think there's an architect that always caught my eye, and I followed him along ever since the 70s. I don't know if he was an architect, really. It doesn't matter. It's Donald Gray. I followed his lead, and he created this workshop school of Nebrija, and he was the creator of such an important architecture. he actually listed all the most interesting traditional typologies of architecture. I think he was Australian, and he was an extraordinary architect. And what did he do? Well, with this school, this workshop school he created, well, we should talk about this, and we should do that in average-sized cities, because if we don't do it, unfortunately, the end could be dramatic, because all of these people, I have worked with most of them, and sometimes I've worked with the grandfather, then the father, and then with the son. So 3 generations, for instance, in the case of Balmaceda. So it'd be very interesting to think about these schools, these workshop schools, and talking about Gray and his sponsorship, because that way of learning, directly learning in the workshop, how they learned, I think is the only way. I think that these schools can be the schools that we currently have, the Escuelas de Artes y Oficios, which we call them. These are art schools, are very interesting for a general idea, but not specific. So that's for training. But for demand, what could we do to increase the demand of that sort of work? Well, these sorts of interventions that we have seen that are of a certain level because they have been carried out by the administration, or because they're singular monuments such as the museum or the social club or the other homes that we have seen that are quite big, can handle the cost of a craftsman. But obviously, in smaller projects, if I tell you the truth, obviously, the price in some cases is too high. So I always talk to them and I tell them that maybe they should create a model that, without losing the essence, could use the same materials, the same steel or the same iron, the same iron, but simplifying the models, having updated models that, as we say, are within the price range. I have been doing some studies with the Capuchin style doors, with the entrance doors, the doors Capuchinas. They're the ones that are classical, but we're simplifying the language, and now people are accepting them because they're in the right price range. So it should be subsidized, but I think that there are enough subsidies in this country. So I think that maybe we should keep on thinking about the possibility of updating these designs. We see in all of those modest homes that you have shown in the video that are within the old town of Écija, that's what you have been doing, more simpler models of those traditional elements. Yes, I know. For instance, it's actually compromised. The Calle Mármoles home and I actually would like to congratulate Irene for the work that she did. She loved that house. It is a house that is only 7 meters wide in the Marble Street. And I think that is as important an intervention as a big home, because it's a piece in the puzzle. It's like when you're doing a puzzle. If you're missing a piece, then in the end, it's not finished. Well, that happens in these monumental areas. In this area, we needed to have the marbles. We needed to have the marbles from the quarry. And in the end, we have the San Miguel Tower, which is precisely the basis of the minaret of an old mosque. And when we look at the Almenara Duke's home, well, it has to be done well, and it is a small home. How do we do it? Well, by using the traditional materials, by using traditional techniques, by using the scales, the proportions, the spans, and all of this has to be adjusted. Obviously, I think we need to use that language, because it's not what the client is demanding, but rather the place where the building is and the whole city demands it. So I think that scales are important. Everything is important in a historical city such as this one. Okay, thank you very much, Fernando. And we have another question from Sergio Cobos, and he's asking, how do you think the architect schools could build bridges with craftsmen and arts being taught? Well, the same way, I think. I was listening yesterday. I was listening to Cosio, one of the professors of the university in Madrid. He was saying that they have created some workshops to do this sort of specific work, and I think that that's what we should do. There should be classrooms. I don't know. I don't really know how the CV is in the school, but there should be classrooms where craftsmen had a lot to say, because there is much intent and much to be said. Because obviously you finish your studies in the school and you don't know about many of these techniques. And in places such as Écija or monumental cities are going to demand. So I think that the craftsmen, could maybe be included somehow in some of the subject matters, practical subject matters in the School of Architects and Technical Architects. Okay, very good. Thank you. And Enrique de la Peña is asking if you think that it would be possible and efficient for public administrations to demand in public contracts a part that is dedicated to building techniques that are traditional with traditional materials within the projects, so that it is preceptive, so that it is established as mandatory. Yes, obviously, something that is happening in cities is that they're altering the pavements and so on, and this is something that we know. They're substituting all the networks, the water networks and so on. Sometimes these are done by companies. They do these turnkey projects, and we don't see the control that the administration should have. I mean, these projects should be monitored by the administration to check what materials are going to be used. If they are dismantling traditional materials, those materials should be reused. And it's the public administration who has to watch over that. And they have to have surveillance commissions. It's not just about fulfilling the regulations, but also to stop using plastics and so on. Okay. Miguel Ángel Balmaceda, whom you've already mentioned, is actually here with us, and he was asking, what do you think are the more vernacular characteristics of the city of Écija? Well, we always go back to the materials, this painter's palette that I have mentioned. It's the elements that you need. If you're going to weave a basket, it's the materials you use. And with just a few materials, with the stone in the pavement, for instance, or the brick from Écija's mud that was used at the time of Romans, that can be used for everything. It can be used for arches, for streets, to do absolutely everything. And we also have the brick that can be used for the vaulted ceilings. Those are some of the materials. Then our lime, not necessarily our lime, but it's from Morón, the best lime in the world, I believe. And those are three elements. And then having a good iron forge with a good metal worker and a good carpentry, what Miguel Ángel does. And it's carpentry that should be copied. It's double carpentry that has the one that sustains the impact. That's the glass. And then inside you have another carpentry with all the shutters that are not just shutters that are just stock. It's been trimmed and it's included in this capuchin style door. So it is actually a safety element, but it protects you not just from someone entering, but also temperature and light. So these are characteristic elements. And I always say that in some place it should be written that no intervention should be done if they don't use the materials that are in the catalog, because we have lots of catalogs that, and I don't talk about the catalogs with wood imitation, but rather pure, the real materials. With 5 elements, you can do lots of architecture. And that is what Miguel Angel, I'm sure, is asking. It's what's genuine that needs to be used, what's genuine from the terminology and language of our city. Thank you so much, Fernando. Thank you so much. So we are running out of time for questions. Thank you so much for being here with us. I would like to thank all the members of the audience who have sent questions. We're sorry we couldn't ask all the questions. We had to select those that were most repeated by the participants in the various chats that we have. We have 2 chats, one for Spanish and one for English. So thank you all very much. And if you have some specific questions that you want to send to Fernando, please don't hesitate to send them our way, and we will send them to Fernando so that he may give you an answer. So thank you very much, Fernando. No, thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.